Make sure that the stream is up now. Get it open. Watch. Test the audio. Testing, testing. Hmm. Testing, testing. No audio is coming through the stream, I don't think. Oh, there we go. All right, let's stop that feedback loop before it starts. All right, so today we're going to be looking at Brunic on Dorado. It's a competitive game, but it's a victory as far as I can see. So the reason that we don't look at victories is because sometimes bad habits can still lead to good results, and victories they're more likely to occur. So it's kind of hard to show you how the outcome could be negative and show how it could be a bad habit in situations where it actually winds up being beneficial in the long run. So, um, yeah, I'm gonna try to talk about as many things as I can to show you how you could have made this a more convincing win or helped your team out a little bit more. But there's going to be a lot of things that I'm going to probably avoid pointing out or say, you know, that the circumstances don't really allow you to see it as easily or something to that level, because you can't, if you wind up winning while feeding, then it looks like feeding is good, but if the enemy team starts punishing your feed, then the feed is actually bad. And the higher you get in rank, the more enemies are going to be able to punish your feeding. So feeding then inherently becomes bad. But in your one victory, I can't really show you that. The good thing is I could see the chat this time, it seems, because I could see you, Graxons. Thankfully, I can be heard. So let's see where this lands and see where this ends up, and I'll try to say as much as I can in terms of improvement. So I think a fair thing to start on is always going to be the composition. Compositionally, you don't really have a tank line that wants to work with the Lucio too much, since Orisa tends to get most of her value from long range, though Hog can enjoy closing distances on people. It's not necessarily required. He has an alternate fire that allows him to hold up to 10 meters quite comfortably, and pull makes it so that people will be drawn into his range quite nicely. On Dorado first point, there's going to be a decent number of sightlines where Hog has, a good comfort range, and on second point, it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult for the Hog to get value unless the enemies purposely close that distance. So just looking synergistically, the tank line doesn't necessarily do anything for you. As a support line, you kind of balance out nicely. Moira is able to do all of the brunt healing, while Lucio offers some utility to the team with mobility if it's needed. Sometimes Orisa can use Lucio to, commit to rotations and stuff like that, but that's usually a more dedicated type of maneuver that you don't see in ranked. Looking at Shaq, and Graxon said, I told him to play Lucio because he needs practice on the hero. Yeah, I think that getting playtime on one specific hero and grinding it out can be really good. So if Brunic spends a lot of time on Lucio, it can kind of lead to a little bit of an expertise where no matter the map or the situation, he'll have a little bit better understanding than some people. This leads to some disadvantages sometimes, but there's really two types of people in Overwatch. I mean, there's two types of people if you draw the line the right way in anything. But there's people like me who flex. We take a long time to kind of develop our skills because we have to learn everything evenly. So nothing really improves until we've improved it all at the same time, just because that's our natural learning nature. And the other one is people who one trick. They have very sharp scalers where they like will learn one hero and only that one hero. They'll improve faster, generally have higher ranks, but they'll kind of hit a ceiling where they need to start learning how to flex onto different heroes or start needing to learn a new hero, which basically means they have to start from square one, and then they wind up losing rank and such. Um, so synergistically with the tanks, not a lot of natural synergy. It's a little bit more of a consorted effort for Lucio to get value with the Orisa. But the Bastion is definitely going to get a decent amount of utility from the Lucio if you play it right, because Bastion is a slow-moving hero that gets the most value from being able to set up on decent sized sight lines where he can kind of just chunk onto enemies without being close enough to be pressured easily by like a diva or something like the diva or something like that. So as long as you're helping the Bastion move around, I think the Bastion can largely get more value. Now, when you're looking at the enemy team, there's a lot of stable hitboxes in the DPS line, mainly because Ashe has a very slender but built out frame, and Torb is a cube. Um, Torb is a cube. I don't know what you want from that. Just look at the center of the cube and hit him, and he will take damage. Orisa also tends to have a stable hitbox, and D.Va is one of the easier head hitboxes in the game. She's also kind of a cubish shape, so you kind of aim at the center. Mercy is going to be one of the harder kill targets as well as Moira, so maybe diving into their backline or concentrating on trying to take out the other supports might not be the best game plan. But there's definitely a lot of fragging potential that Lucio can have on this enemy team if it's done correctly. We'll see how the playstyle develops as we go forward, so there's not too much concern to be had on whether or not, like, I'm not going to be like, oh, this is how you frag, because I want to see how you're going to try to play into this first before I tell you what you could be doing. Because there's some playstyles that don't warrant fragging. So the first thing that I would be aware of is this positioning that you've taken up on the first point. Just be wary of being the first one forward and the farthest one ahead. It can seem like you can get away with a lot on Lucio, but you'll often bleed out small bits of ult charge or get picked by good hit scans at higher elos if you push in front of the shield. So right now you just got pulled together, but a second ago, and I can rewind so that you can see it from this angle. Thankfully it didn't teleport me to a random location on the map. You're playing behind your shield, your Bastion is going on a rotation. This is one of those instances where the Bastion could use a speed boost. You're playing behind the shield, good, limiting the options for the enemy team, and then all of a sudden you're out in the open. So this is a form of out of position. It takes a really well-skilled and disciplined team to be able to kind of like take advantage of this type of misplacement, but simply having the Ashe realize that you're out of position and maybe getting unlucky and having the Torb turret kind of latch onto you will make it so that this is a punishable position. Thankfully, you're playing low elo, or lower elo rather. Not trying to bully you and tell you you're bad, but you're bad. So you lost that fight. And what I would say about that is that your aim sucks. And this is something that can be improved simply by playtime and simply by playing the hero in multiple kind of like scenarios, situations, and realms. So you play it in workshop game modes, you go play them in arcade, you go test them out in like, capture the flag or something stupid where you could just wall ride around and boot people. You go play them in, what was it? In fucking not mystery heroes, no limits, I'm sorry, and you kind of just play against other Lucios or with other Lucios and you see what they're doing. You play him in your custom games with your friends and stuff like that. But aim is going to come with time. You can watch it, you can develop it. I'm not going to focus on that now, but I am going to say that you can get a lot of damage value out of Lucio by utilizing his mobility and his boop and melee. The combo does about 50 to 60 damage. I can't remember the exact numbers right now. But if you leverage your ability to be difficult to hit and just chain together a bunch of melees and boops, you can kind of eliminate low health targets fairly easily without having a lot of mechanical dependency. Boop has a wide kind of berth that it hits, and the melee also has, it's not too difficult to hit a melee on most targets, especially a baby diva. So let's say on this baby diva you were to boop her and melee her multiple times, it would probably take you about 5 to 6 seconds of maneuvering around. It would maybe take you 2 boops and, full melee. Of course, she has support nearby, so this isn't always going to work, but if your mechanics are lacking, you can definitely focus on other aspects of the hero while you're trying to develop them. So hop off the wall, speed boost at the right time, make sure that you're panning between healing and speed to make your change of speed difficult to hit, and such. There's a lot of options that Lucio has that makes him a non-mechanically dependent hero in the early kind of learning stages of him.
Enemy turret within my sight.
Oh, this is my jam.
Be wary of amping healing. Lucio is an off support, he's a utility support, and his utility comes from speed, so upping his utility or amping his utility is going to be the best way for you to get value. Just like right here, you could get a lot of value by ushering your team forward and kind of, urging them to, close that distance by showing them that they have the speed behind them. When you're in comms, you're going to want to call that you're amping speed because there's a very important call out to the tempo of your team as a whole. And the tanks that are knowledgeable of how to use this utility will be grateful to hear a Lucio amping speed. The amp healing is lovely, but you have a Moirash. That's her job, not yours. Your job is to supplement healing in small ways and to provide utility and crowd control. He's really new to Lucio as well. He mostly plays Ana. Yeah, I think we can see this newness in Lucio and a lack of understanding of how the character actually gets value. And this can be kind of easily sorted out by just talking about it mainly. The mechanics, like I said, will come with time, or at least they'll progress with time depending on the rate of actual skill. But the understanding of what you're supposed to be doing is one of those things that you can kind of just like, okay, let me go into this game, let me say this is my job, this is what I'm trying to do for my team. When you get into a game as Lucio, you're trying to help your team engage and disengage using speed, as well as keeping heroes topped off in like mid fights when nothing's happening. When you're not moving your team forward or backward, you're on healing. When you are moving your team forward and backward, you're on speed. You need to know when to go on speed, and it's often going to be at the beginning of the fight or when ultimates are used. Your Hog is trying to push forward. He could use that speed to close the distance to get a little bit more shotgun damage, and on those tanks chunk out a little bit more health on the enemies. So we will proceed for now. So a small way that you can get value there is Lucio gets small speed boosts from jumping off of the wall, so you can do a little lip jump there by hitting the corner of the wall and jumping towards the diva, and then boop her back and then speed yourself backwards. While it's not going to do anything impressive, you'll maybe eat like 15 damage, hopefully not too much more, for the Bastion, and you'll clear him a bit of space, making Diva's shotguns a little bit less worthwhile, which sometimes gives enough time to help your tanks get back to protect someone, or help your healers give a little bit more time to, you know, burst heal someone up or something like that. Small micro plays like this can kind of add up to being the total product of a larger win. But these things are, I'm just giving you a kind of concept of how Lucio can be played and how you can think about the character a little bit more dynamically. You can use the walls to give little boosts of speed to go forward and backwards. And remember, like we had talked about with Burger, if you please have backwards wall riding on, because when you have backwards wall riding on, you will sometimes just accidentally be wall riding backwards, because it is the best way. Like, Lucio will just latch onto the wall and it's the better way for you to be able to get out. It will get more comfortable as you play the character. Just have it on so that you can start using it. I thought that was the enemy Moira for a second. I was like, why did she just pass you like that? I gotta refresh this because it looks like it's all frozen on my end.
Oh, let's break it.
So we could talk theoretically just about the beat for a little bit. The beat was good, and the reason the beat was good was because your team was being hesitant and slow. So because your team was being hesitant, you applied beat to them, you give them speed, and they feel more confident engaging. Sometimes they feel like they have to get value, which makes unaggressive players play more aggressively in situations where they might have to. But beat definitely gets more value in countering opponents' abilities. So countering the D.Va Bomb, though it's a particular timing that you'll have to learn as you play the game. Countering Bob once he comes out, and the Molten Core from the enemy team can be quite valuable. So your beat almost forces ultimates out, which made it get the value it really deserves. Because, you know, once they saw beat, they decided that they needed to chip away that beat in order to kind of like make it an even team fight again. But higher level teams will just kite this. They'll just back up and hide around corners and wait for the beat to decay naturally, while trying to keep one toe on point if possible. And you won't get value out of beat like that. So just be knowledgeable that while this is good sometimes, this is not the solution for beat. This is not the optimal or best way to use it. Again, with the healing, you should be on speed to help push your team a little bit more forward, get them behind onto the other sides of that shield. One of the best things about Lucio in terms of shielding is that shield cuts off line of sight for healers and often cuts off healing based off that. But Lucio is so mobile that he can cross back and forth onto the other side of shields very easily. So if you can help your team get onto the other side of the shield, you can often be the one who keeps them up once they're on the other side of the shield. It just requires some discipline in terms of your tanks knowing to use their abilities once they've gotten past, to create a foothold for your team to then move forward. This can lead to discomfort in the enemy team, and this is one of the better ways that you can create opportunities as a support, by enabling your tanks to be in better and better positionings as the game goes on. Boops can be a dangerous tool. By booping that D.Va back, you took baby D.Va out of your team's kind of like range of control. You booped her into her team, which makes her harder to kill. So be careful. Sometimes you'll boop a charging Rein into your teammate, and your teammate will not be very happy about that. Boop is a dangerous tool. It deserves to be treated as such. I am not sure why you just amped healing. That is a long cooldown for you to just be hitting it for no reason.
Commandeering the payload.
So finally your team's composition has gotten to the setup that it's been trying to get into the whole time, or at least it's optimally made for Bastion on cart with 2 shield tanks protecting him. Sometimes these are the opportunities you want to take to go off onto side flanks, and of course the fight has now devolved and your team has now lost complete possession of the cart. But prior to this, when your team was moving along nicely and there wasn't a ton of healing to do, this Ashe is a prime target to go push and duel. And while you might not feel confidence in your mechanical ability, it definitely can be noted that Lucio can show up and deal maybe like 50 damage easy, just boot melee, and then you can just leave. And just leave that Ashe a little perturbed. Sometimes it pulls the support over here, like the supports are not in LOS, so the support has to go around. Or the Ashe has to go pick up this health pack, which means dueling her later is even easier since she won't have a fallback plan. Just note that if you go to a dive like that, you don't want to commit on it. A common kind of like mistake that Lucios will make sometimes is they'll know their ability to duel, so they'll try to take those duels and commit to them, leaving their team vulnerable for too long. If your team needs eventually the speed and healing, you need to be able to get back to them. So you should go, count to 3 or 4 on a duel, and then you should be leaving to go back to your team. If you haven't killed the person you're trying to kill, they either need to be a very important target who is carrying the enemy team, or someone who, by killing them, you just basically have won. I mean, they just need to be more important than the rest of your team. That would have been a good opportunity to beat. Difficult to time, like I said, because you have to make sure that not too much, like you can't beat as soon as you see it, otherwise the shield will decay too much, but you also can't beat too late because then you'll just die to the bomb. So just be aware of enemy focus and attention. Most of your team is dead at this point, so it's likely that the team will eventually look at you. And while you're not in terrible positioning or out in the open or anything like this, I'm always wary of lucky headshots by the enemy DPS. Like this Ashe pocketed by Mercy is a one-shot headshot for anyone with 200 health. So just be aware of kind of like what they could do to you.
I need healing. Forward me.
Now you need to accelerate. You need to get into position. Let's group up here.
Unnecessary healing boost. Again, you have a Moira. It's not your responsibility.
Oh, let's break it. Yeah!
Thankfully, kind of like the newer metas have made characters like Lucio not as, sorry, let me pause this so I could actually think. The newer metas have made characters like Genji not as kind of viable, where in the past you would Nano Blade, and Nano Blade would be like the end all be all because Genji was, still a good character at the time and there weren't as many counters or CC abilities to shut him down. In the old kind of like way of playing Overwatch, you would get a lot of games like that where you would have a nanoed Genji, and the nanoed Genji would basically either their job would be to force out beat or wait out beat, or just kill the Lucio straight out. This is more often seen like trance counters Blade better because Blade can still sometimes cut through beat with its decay. But it's very important to note that you are not doing anything to stop the enemies from getting value with your ultimate. So you're becoming very predictable in a way. If I was playing on the enemy team after you've done it twice, I would expect you to do it a third time, because the habits usually show up 3 times in a row. If they've shown up 3 times, then they're guaranteed. If they showed up twice, then they're likely. So you can kind of like predict someone's actions with big kind of, actions like this. Like beat is a big thing. If you're always beating before a fight, you will always beat before a fight, it's a redundant sentence, but when you think about it in the context of human habit and learning it in live time, it kind of makes a little bit more sense. So this is something you could have countered with beat. You also should have swapped to healing a little bit sooner. I wouldn't have saved you. It's just a good habit to have just in case it would have saved you. If anybody's typing in chat, I cannot see right now, though I don't know because last time the chat just kind of blew up on me. But I'm going to assume no right now, and swap over to Twitch soon so that we have a less broken platform to work with. This is a good job touching. Lucio is one of the characters that has the responsibility of trying to touch point at the very end of the round. Especially since he has the mobility and escape and healing to do so. This beat is slightly unnecessary just because most of your team was there and you had gotten more picks than the enemy team. The beat also didn't enable you to aggress any further or stabilize any more than you were. Your team was, you know, as comfortable in terms of defensive abilities as they were going to be, and you know, the beat wasn't gonna make, like, they were already in there, you were already in, you weren't gonna go any further, you know? So that's another two things the feed is good for: pushing into positions where you have to take a lot of damage and transitioning to or getting through, generally short range aggression, or you know, making sure that your healers can heal up, because healing will still heal the health underneath the beat. That's a good beat because it's end of fight and or end of like the map basically. You're almost there, and you are also half health, so it's worthy sometimes just beating to keep yourself alive because you have value on the team. Though you know you don't. It's like you don't want to be beating or trancing or something like that just to kind of like keep yourself alive all the time, because what it sometimes comes down to is just being in better positioning or something like that. Good push by your team. You didn't take it all the way, but you know, what are you gonna do about it? Cry? I will. Later. Not now. I'm not crying right now, I swear.
Initiating match.
Do 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 do. So I think largely what we can say for your Lucio, because it seems like you're swapping onto Ana now, is that you don't do anything that makes your team lose. You're not the result of your team losing when you lost fights, but you are the result of your you are not the result of your team losing fights, right? Sorry, restarting the sentence. But you are not the result of your team winning fights anyway. You're basically in net zero in terms of impact. It's the same as trading with someone. You know, you go in, you get a kill, someone dies, you die. I mean, you're not doing anything good for your team because you're dying, but you're not doing anything bad because you didn't go out alone. And that's not necessarily how you want to climb, because that's how you get carried, by being a net zero in kind of like impact on the game. If you're playing with a diamond friend and you're gold, but you know how to just kind of, make it so that you do your base job and, don't have any big impact or real impact on the game aside from just making it so that you're not hurting your team, then you're gonna get carried by your diamond friend who's gonna maybe Genji Blade or Shatter, or do hit all their Zen headshots so that you can get into the next elo. This doesn't necessarily make you bad. There's value in having players like this, but a strong team is going to have people at every level who can have high impact on the game. And sometimes this can mean different things. Certain players take more resources, like certain Reinhardts will take more healing and bubbles and stuff like that, as well as certain Genjis or Reapers or something like that. But certain people can get it without using as many resources. You can hit, let's say, to take for instance Ana, you can hit nades from specific angles to get big antis. That doesn't take any resources, that's just your own skills. So being a net zero on impact is not a terrible thing, but we want to try to get you to be impactful so that you can be a factor in the team winning. There's nothing worse than your team losing and you just feeling hopeless because you can't do anything. We want to move you into that state where you can at least try to do things or start having an impact when your team can't pick up the slack. You want to at least be that person who could pick up the slack. I mean, that person who can be like, all right, you guys can't get it done, let me try to do some more,
4, 3, 2, 1. Attackers incoming. Stop the payload.
So part of what I was talking about when we were playing scrims is knowing where to go when you've been pushed out of your favorite positioning. So you had good positioning up here in terms of using the high ground. It's harder for enemies to get to you. And you have a health pack to drop back as well as a rotation back towards your spawn, which is very convenient. Something that I would say though is that you should play a little bit closer to the wall, try to hide more of your hitbox. Sometimes it's important as Ana to jiggle peek a little bit so that you have less chance of getting shot and the enemies can see you a little bit less often. But once you were pushed out of this position, you began making this rotation and your team started losing space. You kind of just cut across this fountain and then ended up at the end of point A, where you're kind of just sitting right now. Two better rotations that you could have made, each slightly different from the other, is you could have gone up to this perch right here. You can hop on this safe and then hop on this kind of like stand right here and then hop into the window. This then gives you a little bit of sightline right here, but it also allows you to end up over here, and this was really the end goal, because at the end of the day this has the same kind of conditions that you want to look for in terms of support positioning for Ana and Zen, is you want to look for escape routes towards your spawn and health packs, and this gives you both. Though one of them, this escape route is most likely going to wind up with you killed because there's long sight lines to it, and dropping back here is going to most likely wind up getting you killed because it's a tight narrow corridor that spam can often hit you at. It's still a decent escape, and it can also allow you to limit sight lines. If you play on this staircase here, you can poke forward or come up if you need to see the your team. You can drop down and around to see them like here. You can also kind of like maneuver back over here, let's say, to kind of just change your positioning and change where the enemies have to find you. If you're going on a rotation like this through this hallway here, this is something you want to alert your team of. Just say you're repositioning or rotating, and your team should know, or at least will know in the future, that you are kind of like out of LOS or line of sight and you are trying to get to a better spot. So this is something that generally when you're in a team setting, like let's say I have a habit when I play Zarya is I say bubble in 3, right? If my Reinhardt isn't used to that the first time I do it, then eventually after the match, maybe we even like talk about it and he's like, oh, what were you saying during the thing? And I was like, oh, I was saying like my count, like how many seconds until I had bubble, so you knew like when to be aggressive and stuff. Then my Reinhardt knows next time. So if you start saying rotating or repositioning, then your team may not get it the first time. You kind of communicate to them what you were trying to like communicate in a short form, and they'll know for next time that you're moving from LOS. But what this positioning does is it puts you in harm's way, and it requires your tanks to struggle to protect you. They have to wiggle around the cart, wiggle around you, wiggle around the enemies. There's a lot of kind of like
Get in there.
positioning based on relative to the team, and this makes you a variable rather than a static thing. That makes it hard for the tanks to determine where their abilities are going to be best suited. If the D.Va doesn't have to worry about trying to defense matrix you, he or she can do it for the soldier or vice versa or whatever else, it kind of just gives more value to being static position sometimes in support, but you still want to be mobile enough that the enemies don't find you. A lot of playing Ana or many supports is being good enough that your team can know like where you are. You have to be static enough that your team can know, but you have to be dynamic enough that the enemies don't. And it's a really, really weird kind of like line to tread, because you have to be in a static position so that your team can kind of do the thing and protect you easily, but you also have to move enough so that the enemy teams doesn't see you. You also have to aim better than the enemy team too, because if you're trying to hit a Genji jumping around and he's dodging bullets, you have to heal him if he's critical. And part of that is that you just have to aim better than the enemy team. This is also why Ana has a little bit of leeway on her healing, because that's the concept with her, right? You have to be better than the enemies in order to heal the wiggling target. So there's a little bit of leeway on her scoped in aim, and her projectile's a little bit bigger because it's meant to be hit more consistently than the enemies can hit. She's meant to save lives. This positioning also generally doesn't make any sense, because it almost is like you're the tank or DPS using the shield. You can get that nade off from a safer position. Just a little fun tidbit, you I think can use this cart to hop onto the center fountain piece here if you do it properly. It's a little bit of a difficult jump, but I believe it's doable with most characters. This might be an incorrect thing, don't take my word for it necessarily, but it might be something fun to try when you're fucking in scrims or something like that. Not in a real game, please, Jesus, no. Big bomb. Big sleep. Okay. Alright, so, right? This is bad. This is worse, like you've just deteriorated in terms of positioning because you walked blatantly in front of your tanks. You were almost too far for your D.Va's defense matrix to even reach. And your D.Va's defense matrix is actually missing this bullet right here too, which is, I think it hit you. I'm pretty sure that's why you're half health. So you're putting a lot of strain on your tanks here, and you're demanding a lot of resources from this positioning. Whereas your old positioning was very safe. I miss your old positioning. Please be safer. Don't do this. I do not care if you confirm the kill. That is not your job. You want to value your life. You want to stay alive to output value over time, because everybody gets value by being alive longer. Because you fucking being able to output abilities and cooldowns over time, even if they're into a shield, just is inherent value, even if you're 1 health and constantly running away. I want to see that. I want to see where that landed. Just as a side note, because this bomb kind of brought it to my attention, that this is something you might need to be aware of. Part of why things may seem so chaotic from time to time is Overwatch is positioning. I've said this before. So you're being so close means that you have to swivel your camera left and right quite frequently and rapidly in order to see the full scope. By having larger sight lines, you can kind of get a better picture of what's going on and therefore have a better understanding of like what you need to do and where your value will be most impactful. So you want to be kind of like there for many reasons at this point. It's safer, it's better for sight lines, you know, it's good on for your tanks, it's good for your DPS, you know, it just provides more value to your team as a whole, but it also would stop you from being confused with where this D.Va Bomb comes from, because I'm pretty sure you just kind of crouch out of panic around a random spot. Wow. And luck prevails today. I was on for you surviving. Nothing but chance.
You're powered up. Get in there.
You have confirm on? Interesting.
To my will. You're going to.
Good dodge.
Get back in the fight.
Part of the responsibility of some supports is to have those better sightlines and be able to see things like that coming so that you can warn your team. So Mercy's a low mechanically, she's not a very mechanically demanding hero. So one of the responsibilities of Mercy players sometimes, most of the games, is to be able to watch for flanks and stuff like that. So because you can kind of just like look around while having your beam attached to someone, you can also be looking for flankers and kind of like calling things out that is out of your team's peripheral or ability to properly see. And while you can't actually stop it most of the times, because Mercy can only kind of heal or damage boost their res, you can allow your team to kind of have a heads up and prevent it a little bit better. So, congratulations on your victory. The enemy team's inability to realize that there was an Ana 5 feet away from them at all times led to your ability to constantly output healing and your team's sustainability overall. However, against any sort of concentrated effort, I'm sure you would probably collapse. I just want you to notice that even though you won, your positioning on that first point defense for Ana was very risky, to say the least. It wasn't even really valuable because there's more value you can get by being at a distance. So that's all for now. Let me know if you have any other VODs, and I will see you next time.